Hello, my name is Tijmen. I am part of Sokpop collective and I make video games. The last game that I made is called Luckitown. It is a turn-based tower defense game with Yahtzee mechanics. When you start playing Luckitown, you're immediately thrown into the game. You start off doing the tutorial, which is really quick. It only takes about a minute or something, and it just explains very simply what you need to do. There's a funnel, so you can't do anything else. The game just says, all right, throw the dice, and there's nothing else you can do. I disable all of the other functionality. You throw the dice. It is determined beforehand what the dice will be. I think it will be 3 stone and 1 wood, because you will need the wood to build your first building, which is a house. And it will immediately explain to hold the wood, because you also need another resource, the heart. So you need to re-roll the dice, but you want to keep the wood because you're going to need it. And that immediately explains like 90% of the gameplay. Yahtzee goes way back for us at Sokpop. Every time we flew to the United States for the Game Developers Conference or for other events, we always end up playing Yahtzee on like the tiny screen in front of your chair for hours and hours straight. I think this one time we literally played it for like five hours straight. I don't know why, but we really love Yahtzee for some reason. So we've always wanted to make games with Yahtzee, and now I did it. The game has Yahtzee mechanics, but only for a little bit. I think when I started making this game, I just wanted to make a game where I used Yahtzee and combined it with a different genre. And my preference was going to a town builder game, because I really enjoy making those. But I had to cut a lot of those Yahtzee mechanics because some of them really didn't work. And eventually the hold mechanic, where you throw dice and you can hold a few of them, which you won't re-roll when you re-roll the dice, that was the best mechanic out of Yahtzee for me. Originally, Luckitown wasn't meant to be this bigger game. It was just meant to be a small game. Aaron was making a bigger game, and he realized he wanted to spend more time on it, but he didn't have that time. So he switched to a smaller project, which in the end became Dungeon Ball. Aaron had a little bit of a time issue. So Tom and we said, well, maybe we can just make something small. And we were brainstorming on what type of small game we could make. Tom said, I'm just gonna make a Yahtzee game where you just throw Yahtzee. And I was like, yeah, and you're also building a town, or, you know, I was already adding too many mechanics in there like I usually do. And Tom said, no, I just want to make just a Yahtzee game. And that really, I felt like I still needed to scratch that itch, you know, so I just said, all right, I'll also make a Yahtzee game. Kind of stole his idea, but also wanted to do my own version of it. So in the end, Tom did make a small Yahtzee game, which became Double. But for me, this small game became bigger and bigger, and I just decided to turn it into a full thing. So that's how it started. At first, the only thing I knew I wanted to make with the game was incorporate Yahtzee mechanics and make some kind of town building game. So I started off with this playground where little characters, little humans were walking around. You could throw a lot of dice, and I was using the actual Yahtzee mechanic where you could throw them 3 times, and after that your result would be whatever was gonna happen in that world. So it wasn't turn-based. You had 3 rolls instead of just 1 or endless. They were like this little package, and that all changed in the end. I found out it's really hard to describe to the player, oh, you need to roll 3 times and then something happens. It's way easier if it's just you roll once and then again, and each time you roll, it's a turn. So it automatically became a turn-based game. That actually made a lot of sense for me, because you need to think about what you're gonna roll. And if stuff is happening in the world, I think these 2 mechanics collide a lot. But I didn't originally know that. I needed to find out by just trying stuff. So usually I try a lot of different stuff and just see what works and what doesn't work, which is really hard to decide on. You either decide on what to do based on your experience or whatever you feel is right. There's this very instinctive part of game design where you think, well, this doesn't feel good, or I don't think this is good, but you're actually never sure. and some of it is based on experience, where you know, all right, I have already made like 20 games now for the Patreon, and I've made this mistake a lot before. So I kind of know for a few game genres what people do enjoy, so I kind of base it on that. And the third is probably the best way to design your games, is to just play test it on someone. Don't tell them what to do, don't answer their questions probably, and just observe and see what they understand or what they think should happen. And I kind of use that. So I think this game became a bit better than my other games just because I play tested it a lot. Yeah, when making Luckitown, I ran into a lot of like these little issues that I had to work around. There's always this stuff that you think is going to work and it doesn't, or you know there's an issue but you don't know the solution. And usually they are not these big events, you know, like, oh, I made this one boss fight and it doesn't work, I should totally change it. It's usually you just make something, and I play test it on someone and I see them drop down the controller or whatever after like 5 minutes. So I observe from that they don't enjoy my game at all. But they will say they were enjoying it actually, but it's kind of what I observe. So I know there's something wrong, but it's just really hard to put your finger on it. And even if I ask the person, they probably wouldn't even know what was wrong with that play session either. But there's always something, and it can be just really small. This one time I made a game which was a platformer, and all of the blocks you were walking on, it was grid based, and the blocks were, I think, 24 by 24 pixels. And at some point I changed them to maybe a little bigger because I thought it would look better, and I didn't really think it would make that much of a difference. But actually in the end, at some point, I found out that people didn't enjoy the game anymore that much, but they didn't really know why. They just say, well, you know, it's a fun game, but they were playing it for less and less than people were before. And I just looked at what I changed about the game, and I found out that I changed the size of the tiles, and I resized them back to their original size, and all of a sudden the game became more enjoyable again. So it can be like these really small changes, and it's really hard to find out. There is a mechanical reason for it. It was because the ground you were walking on could disappear, basically. You could pick it up. And when the tiles became larger, when you would pick up one, you would immediately fall through the stage. And when they were smaller, if you would pick up one, you would not immediately fall through the stage because the character was larger than the tile. So you would still stand on another one. Whenever I start a new project, for me it's really hard to find a motivation. But it's also very essential, because if you have a lot of motivation, everything just flows, you know? You just work on your game, the time flies, you make a lot of cool stuff. And when you're not motivated, sometimes it can be really hard to push yourself and get any progress. You'll even make cheap decisions maybe. And so what I do usually for projects is I try to find this one thing that I haven't done before, or something that really excites me, and that could be something based on music, or I would look at a painting or something like that, and I'm thinking, oh, I want to make this type of game that uses this cool art. For example, I used that for Apocalypse. I looked at the art of a board game called Oath, and I really thought it looked great, and I wanted to make a game that kind of looked like that. So that's how I started. It was something new for me. And sometimes I start from a more technical standpoint. I think I started Sunset Kingdom by making a piece of code that were 2 polygons which merged into one. And that's how I built the islands. And when you have that base, you can kind of use that and the motivation you had to build off of that. I found out that really works well for me. So for Luckitown, it was the dice. The only problem was I'm not smart enough to make those dice. I tried and couldn't make them work. So in the end, I asked Ruben to help me out. And I think that's proof why it's really nice to have a collective. I could just ask Ruben, hey, you really need to help me make these dice. So when I had the dice code of Ruben, I could kind of use that to turn it into a little bit more of how I wanted to use them, like what kind of angle or maybe the visual style of it, because what he made looked a little bit different. And I used that motivation and excitement to build the rest of the game of it. Actually, in the first few days when I made Luckitown, I was just rolling the dice after each other because it was so much fun to do. The game was received a bit, I don't know, initially it was kind of polarized. There were both positive and negative reviews. I think in the Discord people liked them, but on Steam I saw some really legit feedback that some of the stuff didn't work out at all. So I immediately start patching some stuff. I try to listen to what the players are saying, and unless I don't agree, I'll try to somehow fix it and do that as fast as possible. And I think usually people really appreciate that. When I look back on the game, I'm really glad with what I made. I think it became quite solid what I wanted to make, which is incorporate Yahtzee mechanics and build a town building game, which it did. It did become that. It's enjoyable, you can play it for multiple hours, people seem to enjoy it, and the latter is actually my favorite thing. I think I make games so I can see how other people enjoy them. Like the worst thing that could happen to me is make a game, and even though a lot of people would enjoy it, I wouldn't see that. I wouldn't see or hear anything about their experience. I mean, that just sucks for me. I want to see how people play it.